Hi, welcome to today's session of Every Mark Matters with Mr. Mac. Today we're having a look at Edexcel Paper 2, Anglo-Saxon and Norman England. And we have got, I think, as a question type, a great question type, but I think it's a really tricky question. I've specifically chose this question because it is really tough in terms of the knowledge. But let's have a little look at how this question is created, how it's made up of, so we can really decipher what it wants us to do and how we can get full marks on it. So let's have a quick look here. So first and foremost, the first component, the first element of this question is the command phrase. Okay? In this instance, it's how far do you agree? So what it means is you must create an argument. And what you must do is you must evaluate reasons, or in this instance, consequences. And I'll come back to that in a moment. So it's asking you to create an argument, and obviously that must include your own opinion. Okay? Right, so we have an understanding of what it wants us to do. So in which case then, if we need to create an argument, let's decipher what it wants us to argue about. So let's have a look at the focus of this question. And in this context, it is the appointment of Lanfranc as Archbishop of Canterbury. Okay? And I mentioned to you at the start, this is a really tricky topic. You know, the Catholic Church is not something well known within the Norman conquest. It's a really, really, really tough topic. So let's take the time now to look into and have a think about what knowledge might be relevant. So obviously the first one is we'll refer to the actual one in the question, increasing Norman control. Right, so let's do increasing Norman control. So why don't you now take the time, press pause, have a look at your revision guide, textbook, notes, history book, online resources to consider what consequences might there be of the appointment of Lanfranc. So we've got increasing Norman control. Maybe you could think about facts that fit in with there, and maybe think about two more. Righto, press pause and I'll see you very shortly. Okay, right, let's have a quick look then. So hopefully you've taken the time there to have a look at maybe some knowledge that you could put in that's relevant to this question. What I'm going to do is I'm going to present knowledge that I think is relevant. And if you want to do this in a different coloured pen, you're more than welcome to. Right, so first and foremost, let's talk about increasing Norman control. So first and foremost, what Lanfranc did is he replaced all Anglo-Saxon bishops with Norman ones. Remember, Lanfranc replaces Archbishop Stigand's Archbishop. Why does he do that? Well, he does that because Archbishop Stigand supports Harold. Okay? Again, and I think this is really important, remember that the Catholic Church, everyone thinks that they're going to go to hell if they don't follow the rules of the Catholic Church. So everyone at the time is super religious. Okay? And because of that, is Lanfranc turns it into a propaganda machine. And the way in which they do that, or the way in which he uses it as a propaganda machine, is it reinforces the divine right. As in, William is the chosen king of England. And how do we know? Well, he clearly won at Battle of Hastings, and God allowed him to win at the Battle of Hastings. So again, it recreates this propaganda machine. And if you are rebelling against William, well, you are going against the beliefs and word of God. Okay? Right, let's move on and let's think about, it's kind of linked to establishing Norman control, but let's talk about the building of cathedrals. So you'll have seen many of the cathedrals in and around your area. Most of these are Norman. And again, what this does is this demonstrates wealth and power. Moreover, remember, as a sign of that, is they are made out of stone. Which, in essence, doors demonstrate that wealth and power, and they are mostly positioned around transport or population hubs. Okay? Within that, with exception to maybe a Motte and Bailey Castle, these cathedrals would be the biggest buildings. That people have ever seen. I'm just going to put AS for Anglo-Saxons. Have ever seen. Okay, right. And then the final one is a little bit more of a tricky one, because actually we don't see the impact of this consequence within the story of the Normans, but we have the separation of church courts. Okay, and what I mean by that is that if you are in the church, if you work for the church as a priest, a bishop, a monk, or a nun, is you have different rules and different punishments. Okay, and again, in essence, what this does is it strengthens the power of the king, of the church. Sorry. And what eventually happens is you can have the church overruling the king. But that won't happen with William. Okay. So we've got a bit of an idea. So we know what the question wants us to do. It wants us to create an argument. We know sort of three main consequences here from the appointment of Archbishop Lanfranc. Let's think about, well, what does Edexcel want us to do? What does the exam board want us to do? All right, and we'll have a look at something called the second order concepts, and you don't need to memorize these. This is just something called disciplinary history, which is the way in which we present our knowledge and the way in which we apply our knowledge. And in this context, it is consequence. So we're not talking about reasons for an event, we're talking about how an event affected something else. So remember, consequence just means how did X lead to Y? Okay, so how did the appointment of Archbishop Lanfranc increase Norman control? How did the appointment of Archbishop Lanfranc lead to the building of cathedrals? How did the appointment of Archbishop Lanfranc lead to the separation of churches? Okay, so that's what we're looking for. How did the event lead to the consequence? All right, as this is a 16-mark question, what you need to be making sure you're doing is you are spending 20 minutes. I put a 3. 20 minutes writing down 4 paragraphs. You must have a conclusion. I would say within that is you have a 2-sentence introduction. In that, you are presenting your judgment. And the reason why you're going to do that is if you run out of time, what you can do is you can simply just present your introduction there, and you're not missing out on 4 marks, or you're not missing out on your judgment marks. I'm going to run out of space, but I'm going to try and put it down here. So allow me to explain to you how, so we know, what Edexcel want us to do. We know what the question wants us to do. We know what knowledge needs to happen. Let's have a look at the mark scheme. So I'm going to create a quick success criteria down here. Right, so let's have a look at AO1. That's knowledge. Let's have a look at AO2. That's explanation. And let's have a look at AO2J. That's judgment. Your answers are scored in level 1, 2, 3, and 4. A level 3 does not mean a grade 3. Level 4 does not mean a grade 4. It's just the quality of your answer. Of course, if you're scoring level 4 across the board, you're going to get a great grade. But what they do is they just add up the marks to determine the actual grade boundaries themselves. We obviously want to be about here, but let's have a look at how we get there. So very similar to an explain why. You need 2 facts per para. For level 4, you need to have 2 precise facts per para. In terms of your explanation, you need to have 2 sentences of, I'm just going to put EXP just to save space, per para. And again, for level 4, you need to have 3 sentences. Per para, and that is how, why, so what. Okay, and then for your judgment, you need to present your opinion. Overall, do you agree with the statement? That must be in a conclusion. And for level 4, what we are after is comparative conclusion. So within that, how much do you agree with the statement? Yes or no? However, I also think this is important because, okay? Right, ladies and gents, put all your distractions away. Set yourself a 20-minute timer. You're very capable at this. I look forward to reading them. Take the time now to double check your notes. Set yourself a 20-minute timer. Put all your distractions away. And have a go at answering the main consequence of the appointment of Archbishop Lanfranc in 1070 was to increase Norman control. How far do you agree? Press pause and I'll see you shortly. Okay, welcome back. So I'm hoping that, as I said, it's a really tricky question. So I'm impressed that you've had a good stab at that. So here's what we'll do: is I'm going to read through my answer, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to self-assess my answer, and I'm going to annotate my answer with AO1. That's for knowledge. If I use a precise fact, I might put AO1 plus. Then I'm going to annotate AO2 for explanation, and I might put AO2J for explanation, or I might just put a J in a circle, and that just shows my judgment. Okay, right, let's just have a quick look here then. So I'm starting straight away with my 2-sentence introduction, 2-sentence summary. Overall, do I agree or not? I agree with the view that Lanfranc's appointment increased Norman control as it allowed William to create a propaganda machine of the Catholic Church. Right, there's my judgment mark. That's one judgment mark straight away. Although Lanfranc's appointment also led to the creation of stone cathedrals and separate court judges. Right, so straight away I've presented an introduction, really short introduction, and that includes my opinion. So as I said, if I run out of time to actually share my conclusion at the end, I've already got it here, so I'm not going to miss out on any marks. Let's have a look at my first paragraph. One reason why someone might agree with the statement is because Lanfranc and William removed Anglo-Saxon religious leaders and replaced them with Normans. Right, perfect. So that's AO2 there. So I've presented a reason there. For example, a great starter to present my knowledge. In 1070, Lanfranc replaced the ousted Anglo-Saxon Archbishop Stigand. So AO1 plus for a precise bit of knowledge, who supported Harold Godwinson's claim as king. There's my first fact. I also know that Lanfranc removed Anglo-Saxon bishops and priests who were later replaced by Normans. Perfect. Right, so there's my second fact. So, I'll admit to you, I've not put reams and reams of sentences for both of these facts, but I've just put the relevant knowledge that I've got that allows me to demonstrate my explanation. So now what I need to do is I need to say, how did this reason lead to increased control? Okay, right, let's have a quick look. This led to increased Norman control. This led to, it presents the how. This led to increased Norman control of England as the Catholic Church in England under Lanfranc became a giant propaganda machine to manipulate the Anglo-Saxon population to support William's rule. There's the how. As a result, the Anglo-Saxons supported William's rule during the revolt of the Earls, as by that point they'd been brainwashed through the fear of going to hell. There's the why. Perfect. So again, what I'm doing here is I'm presenting the how, the why. This shows the importance of Lanfranc's appointment as a bishop as it increased Norman control through propaganda. There's the so what. So again, within that is I've rewritten the question, made a statement, I've backed it with two facts. I've gone on to how it helps him increase control, why it helps him increase control, why that reason's important. Let's have a look, or why that consequence is important. Let's have a look at the next paragraph. Alternatively, some might agree that the main consequence of Lanfranc's appointment was the creation of separate church courts. Right, here's my AO2, here's my second fact. This was when Lanfranc created the Council of Winchester in 1076, AO1 plus for both of there, which established separate church courts, meaning that bishops and priests were tried under church law. So there's my first fact. Let's go on to my next page. I also know that this reduced the royal influence in church matters and strengthened the power of the Catholic Church. Perfect, there's my second fact. So I've presented the reason, I've backed it up with two facts. This led to a split between royal and religious laws, creating a totally different legal system for the church. Right, so now I'm saying, how did Lanfranc's appointment lead to this? I've said it created a total different legal system. As a result, William and his descendants would be unable to reduce the power of the Catholic Church without creating problems. There's my why. This would be important as theoretically the church could overrule the king and get away with the consequences. There's the so what. So I've presented how Lanfranc's appointment led to the consequence, why Lanfranc's appointment led to the consequence, and why that consequence is important. Well, it can overrule the king. If you look up the year 1117, maybe you can remind yourself why. And then finally, my final reason, another reason why someone might disagree is a construction of cathedrals. There's my AO2, presented a reason. For example, Lanfranc oversaw the construction of cathedrals across England in major population hubs. Easy knowledge there. There's my first fact. I also know that cathedrals were built out of stone, and Canterbury Cathedral was built using stone from Normandy itself, modelling the European design. There's my second fact. Right, now what I need to do is I need to make sure I'm talking about how the appointment of Lanfranc led to the building of stone cathedrals. These buildings became massive symbols of Norman dominance as well as a central administrative base of religious power. There's the how. This would be important because in a similar method to Motte and Bailey castles, stone cathedrals would become a method of intimidation and sign of Norman wealth. And you'll notice I began to run out of time here, so I've missed my so what, so no so what there. Alright, but you'll see here, state the reason, I've got 2 facts about it. How, why, so how did Lanfranc's appointment lead to stone cathedrals? Why did Lanfranc's appointment lead to stone cathedrals? Missing out the so what. In conclusion, I believe the main consequence of Archbishop Lanfranc's appointment is increased Norman control of England. There's my judgment mark. This is because Lanfranc used the church as a huge propaganda machine to manipulate the Anglo-Saxons into supporting William. I appreciate, so by using that phrase and demonstrating the other reasons, the importance of the creation of stone cathedrals and church courts. So again, there's my second judgment mark. Oh, there's my next judgment mark. But overall, the Normanisation of the church consolidated power, and there we have it. So if I were to just go straight back to this little mark scheme down here, well, have I got precise facts in every paragraph? Yes, I have. Have I got how, why, so what? I have in 2 of them, but not in the last one. Have I got a comparative conclusion? Yes, I have. I've got an introduction and a conclusion at the end. So what that would mean is that a harsh examiner would probably give this 14 out of 16. I think what would actually happen is the real examiner would either give this 15 out of 16 or 16 out of 16. The where I'm falling short is the lack of this so what at the end of that paragraph, but it's still a fairly good effort. Take the time to self-assess your own now, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.